The bedroom door was locked from the inside. That was what Matt Baker told the police. He said he had to pick it open with a screwdriver to reach his wife. For more than a year, that locked door and the typed note beside the bed was enough to close the case. Kari Baker had taken her own life. Everyone believed it. Everyone except the people who knew her best. It was just before midnight, in the early hours of April 8th, 2006, in Hewitt, Texas, a small, deeply Baptist community about 10 miles south of Waco. Matt Baker called 911 to report that his wife was not breathing.
EMS, what's your emergency?
My wife is laying in the bed. Her lips are blue, hands are cold.
Are you in there with her right now? Is she conscious?
The note that says I'm sorry, basically.
I put my head to her chest and didn't see or feel her chest rising. No air coming out. Felt for pulse. Nothing.
Okay, listen carefully. I need you to get her laying flat on her back on the ground and remove any pillows, okay?
Okay, put her on the floor.
Correct.
Head now, put her
All
on.
right, she needs to be on the floor, yes, sir.
Okay. I need to get a hold of her parents. They live in town, and I want them to come over and be with the kids.
Get somebody else started on this, okay?
Thank you.
By the time paramedics reached the house, it was already far too late. Kari Baker was 31 years old. She was an elementary school teacher, a Sunday school teacher, the wife of a minister, and the mother of 2 young daughters who were asleep down the hall while their father made that call. To the officers who arrived that night, the scene seemed to tell its own story. A bottle of over-the-counter sleep aid on the nightstand, a typed note, a husband who said his wife had never recovered from a grief that had been hanging over their family for years. The case would be closed within hours. It should never have been. Before she was a case file, before she was a headline, Kari Baker was a young woman from Central Texas with a steady, ordinary life that she had built carefully and loved deeply. She was born Carrie Lynn Doolin, the daughter of James and Linda Doolin, a couple who would later become the most important people in this entire story, though no one could have known that yet. Kari met Matt Baker while they were students at Baylor University in Waco. By the accounts that survive, they fell for each other quickly and married within months. He went on to become a Baptist minister. She went into teaching. To the people around them, they looked like a model couple in a community that placed enormous value on exactly that kind of life. Faithful, married, raising children inside the church. Kari was, by every account from the people who knew her, devoted to her students and to her children. A childhood friend, Julia Thorell, would later push back hard against the idea that Kari was the kind of person who would abandon her family. She described a woman who was sad at times. Yes, but functional, present, and anchored by her daughters. That distinction would matter enormously later, because there was a real grief in Kari's life, and it was not invented. The Bakers had 3 daughters, Kenzie, Cassidy, and Grace. The middle child, Cassidy, was diagnosed with a brain tumor as an infant. She died in March of 1999, when she was little more than a year old. Kari never fully stopped grieving for her. Anyone who knew the family knew that. And it was that genuine, visible, well-documented grief that her husband would later use as the foundation for a lie. The account Matt Baker gave that night was specific, and over time, it became the thing that undid him. He said that on the evening of April the 7th, after he had put their daughters to bed, Kari sent him out to rent a movie. He left the house around 11:15 p.m. He stopped for gas. He drove to a video store and picked up the film. He returned a little after midnight. The bedroom door, he said, was locked. He knocked. There was no answer. So he opened it with a screwdriver and found Kari lying on the bed. Police did not interview Matt at length until nearly 2 months after Kari's death, and even then, it was a casual conversation rather than an interrogation. In that recorded sit-down, Matt offered his own theory of how his wife had died.
I left about 11 or so. I wasn't gone maybe 40 minutes. I question where she would have taken the medicine. Personally, this is my opinion. I don't think the medicine is what killed her, and but was knocked out enough and choked. So no, I don't know if that's just me trying to put stuff together to make it, I don't know.
The Justice of the Peace, Billy Martin, consulted with the Hewitt police, and ruled the death a suicide. He did not visit the scene. No autopsy was ordered. The reasoning on its surface was simple. A grieving mother, overwhelmed by the loss of a child, had taken her own life on the approaching anniversary of that loss. It was a clean, sad, closed story, and it began to fall apart almost immediately in the minds of the people who had loved Kari most. The first thing that troubled Kari's family was the note. It was typed, not handwritten, typed, on a computer, including the signature. For a woman who, by her family's account, wrote things by hand, that alone was strange. But it was the content that stayed with them. The note apologized. It said she was tired and wanted to sleep. It asked for forgiveness. It told her daughters and her parents that she loved them. And it praised Matt. Bill Johnston, a former federal prosecutor who would later work for the family, put the problem plainly. He said the note praised Matt and blamed Kari, and that those tones, set down in an unsigned typed message, were deeply suspicious. Kari's loved ones also noticed grammatical and spelling errors in the note. Small things, but things that did not read like the careful, educated woman they knew, a third-grade teacher with a master's degree. And then there was the simplest objection of all, the one Kari's mother kept returning to. Linda Doolin did not believe her daughter would leave her 2 living children behind. Cassidy's death had broken Kari's heart, but it had also given her 2 more reasons to keep going. The idea that she would walk away from Kenzie and Grace did not fit the person they had known her entire life. The family raised these concerns. At first, very little happened. The case was closed, and reopening it would mean asking the authorities to admit they had gotten it wrong. As the family began searching for anything the investigation had missed, they found something that read, in hindsight, like a warning. Tucked in the margins of Kari's Bible was a handwritten prayer she'd written only days before her death.
Lord, I have so much worry and I cannot get a hold on it. I'm asking you to protect me from harm. I'm not sure what is going on with Matt, but Lord, help me find peace with him.
She had written down a fear of Matt in her own hand in the place she went to pray, and then she was dead within the week. On its own it proved nothing, but to the people reading it after her funeral, it did not sound like a woman planning to leave the world. It sounded like a woman who sensed something closing in. As the Doolins looked more closely, they found something that reframed everything. In the period around Kari's death, the family discovered numerous phone calls between Matt and a young woman from his congregation, a 20-something single mother named Vanessa Bulls. Some of those calls came from Kari's own cell phone, a phone Matt had given to Vanessa within days of his wife's death, explaining that she needed one after a difficult divorce. There was more. Within roughly 2 weeks of Kari's death, an employee at a Kay Jewelers store at the Richland Mall later said she had seen Matt Baker in the store. He was there with his children and a tall, blonde woman, and they were looking at rings. Years later, Matt would tell ABC's 2020 that they had simply gone to look at earrings for one of his daughters. At trial, Vanessa Bulls would testify differently, that Baker had told his daughters they were there to look at wedding rings for her. At the time, Vanessa denied any romantic relationship with Matt. She told police she had no involvement with him before Kari's death and knew nothing about how Kari died. For a long stretch of the investigation, she held to that, and as long as she did, the case had a motive forming around its edges, but no one willing to confirm it. What happened next is the heart of this case, and it is the reason Kari Baker's name is known at all. When the official system declined to reopen the investigation, James and Linda Doolin built their own. They hired a private investigator, they gathered evidence, and critically, they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Matt Baker, a civil action with a lower burden of proof than a criminal case that gave them legal tools to demand documents and ask questions the police had not. Their attorney, Bill Johnston, brought in a former Texas Ranger named Matt Cawthon to help. Both men grew openly critical of how the local authorities had handled Kari's death. A digital forensics expert went through Matt's computers and found, alongside searches for sermons, that he had been viewing pornography during work hours inside the church, and that roughly a month before Kari died, someone on that computer had searched how to overdose on sleeping pills. There was the timeline. Matt said his wife was alive when he left and dead when he returned, all within a window of about 45 minutes. But a crime scene expert hired by the family pointed to the photographs and to lividity, the way blood settles in a body after death, pulled downward by gravity once the heart stops. The degree of lividity visible in Kari's body, the expert argued, was not consistent with someone who had died in that narrow window. It suggested she had been dead longer than Matt's account allowed, and there was a group of women in Waco, Kari's mother, her aunts, and their allies, who refused to let the case die. The local press eventually gave them a nickname. They called them the Charlie's Angels of Waco. They were retirees and family members with no badges and no authority, and they would not stop knocking on doors. The pressure worked, slowly. More than a year after Kari's death, a judge amended the official cause of death, changing it from suicide to undetermined. Kari's body was exhumed so that the autopsy that should have happened the first time could finally be done. The toxicology told a different story than the closed case had. The findings indicated drugs in Kari's system, and investigators came to focus on Ambien, a prescription sleeping medication, in addition to the over-the-counter Unisom. An examination of the couple's computers showed that Matt had taken early steps toward buying sleep medication online before backing out of the purchase. It was not, on its own, proof of murder, but it was a long way from the clean suicide the town had accepted. Through all of it, Matt Baker maintained his innocence and went on the offensive, giving interviews to national media to tell his side.
There's no way I could ever have hurt my wife. I loved her. She's the mother of my children, and I missed her, and I did not hurt my wife.
In September of 2007, Matt Baker was arrested. He spent roughly 2 months in jail late that year, but there was still a problem at the center of the prosecution's case, and everyone working it knew what it was. The one person who could speak to what Matt had actually planned and done was still saying she knew nothing. For the case to move from suspicion to proof, prosecutors needed Vanessa Bulls, and for a long time, she gave them nothing. The breakthrough came when she was subpoenaed and offered immunity. Tell the truth, and she would not be charged herself. One of the prosecutors, Crawford Long, would later describe that moment in stark terms. With immunity in hand, Vanessa Bulls changed her account entirely. She admitted to the affair she had spent years denying. And on the stand, she told the jury what she said Matt had told her.
I was buying into everything. He was a complete, and still is, a manipulative liar who took me my vulnerable state and made me believe everything he said. He came by and was kind of smiling. He said, "Oh, don't date other guys, just date your pastor," and kind of smiled. And he asked if he could hold my hands to pray, and he did. Then afterwards, he started to kiss me. Then he just took my hand and led me to the bedroom. It was sometime mid-March. He said that, she took sleeping pills every night, so maybe he could make it look like she overdosed on sleeping pills. He mentioned that he would leave a note, and he said that he would type it. And I said, "That's never gonna work, you're gonna be caught." And he said, "Oh no, she types everything."
She just asked Matt, "Well, why are you trying to kill her? Why don't you just get a divorce?" And he told her that he would never be able to preach again. I guess in his mind, the divorce was worse than actually committing murder.
He had gotten big horse pills. He said he emptied out all the contents and put crushed Ambien in them. He said he handcuffed her to the bed, started kissing her and touching her all over until she fell asleep. Then he said he got the pillow and put it over her face.
What did he say happened next?
He said that he thought she was dead, and he just said she just took one big ass for air, and he said, "Oh," and then put the pillow back on her face, except he did this with his hand to be sure that he suffocated her. He said that he set everything up, locked the door, and left.
So you knew that Friday, April 7th, of 2006 was the day that he was going to try it again.
I knew he was going to try it then, yes.
All right.
In truth, who would believe me? He was a preacher. And so I felt like I was stuck.
A few days after her grand jury appearance, Matt Baker was indicted for murder. According to one account from the period, when word spread through Waco, the town's jaw collectively dropped. The beloved minister, the grieving widower, was going to stand trial for killing his wife. The trial began in January 2010 at the McLennan County Courthouse. By then, the case had drawn national attention, and Matt Baker still carried real support in his deeply religious community, where many simply could not square the man they knew with the crime he was accused of. In Texas, the jury also decides the sentence in a separate punishment phase, and it was here that the full shape of who Matt Baker was came into view. A series of women took the stand, by one account, no fewer than 12, and described unwanted sexual advances from Matt Baker, some dating back to his years in college.
He came up from behind me, put his hand on my breast. I pushed him away, told him no. He tried to kiss me, told him no.
I remember having to use all my strength to try to keep him off of me and from taking my clothes off.
Including Laura Wilson, the student trainer who worked alongside him in college.
He took his hand and began running it up my thigh and between my legs.
The man the community had trusted as a spiritual leader, the man who had been welcomed into Kari's family as a son, had spent years, according to this testimony, using his position to pursue women who came to him for guidance. The jury deliberated for roughly 7.5 hours. They found Matt Baker guilty of murder. At sentencing, Kari's mother addressed him directly.
Matt, she loved you. And then you took her from us, Matt. You discarded her like she was yesterday's trash. You murdered the mother of your children.
The jury sentenced Matt Baker to 65 years in prison. Matt Baker has never admitted guilt. From prison, he has maintained that he is innocent and has filed appeals, blaming his mistress, his trial lawyer, the judge, and his in-laws for what he describes as a conspiracy that sent an innocent man to prison. The courts have not agreed. His conviction was upheld, and he remains incarcerated in the Texas prison system. Under his sentence, he will not be eligible for parole for decades. The two daughters at the center of it all, Kenzie and Grace, who had slept down the hall the night their mother died, became the subject of a long and painful custody battle between their two sets of grandparents. They were ultimately raised by Kari's parents, James and Linda Doolin, the same people whose refusal to accept a lie had exposed the truth about how the girl's mother died. There is a hard fact underneath the verdict that is worth stating plainly. If the Doolins had accepted the official ruling, if they had grieved quietly and moved on, the way the system seemed to expect them to, Matt Baker would almost certainly have remained a free man, a respected minister, with the death of his wife filed away forever as a suicide. The case was not solved by the institutions built to solve it. The justice of the peace ruled by phone. No autopsy was ordered. The investigation that mattered was launched by a grieving mother and father who could not be talked out of what they knew. It is easy with a case like this to remember the minister and forget the woman, to remember the trial, the mistress, the typed note, the lividity, the long fight for an indictment. But none of that is why this story matters. Kari Baker was a teacher who loved her students and a mother who, by every account from the people who actually knew her, would not have left her children. She had survived the worst grief a parent can know, the loss of her daughter Cassidy, and she had kept going, for Kenzie and for Grace. That grief, which was real and private and hers, was taken from her one more time after her death and turned into a weapon to explain away her murder. The people who refused to let that stand were not detectives or prosecutors. They were her parents.
She was an amazing mother. And she would fight for any of us. And I just wanted everybody to know the truth.
In the end, The truth they fought 4 years to prove was simple and terrible. The woman the town believed had given up on life had not given up on anything. It was taken from her, in her own bedroom, by the person who was supposed to love her most. Kari Baker was 31 years old.